All right, so we're back, and can't compete with the clock. So we are now. We've been talking about. I want to say the last time we met, we began the doctrine of sin, God and the Creator, and God the Creator and creation. Creation being us and everything else created. And Guthrie's subtitle for this section is "Why Don't You Just Be Yourself?" So we started with three basic forms of sin. Sin is disobedience, sin is sensuality, and I think we are in the middle of the second one. Sin is sensuality.
So what is that as far as Roman numerals and letters?
We are in Roman numeral 2, so we're on page 44.
Okay.
Is everyone there?
Roman numeral, what?
Oh, okay.
It's page 44. Just look at the page
Roman
number.
numeral 3, isn't it? Oh, no,
Yes.
that's original sin.
We're still in, wait, what?
Oh, sin as sensuality?
Yeah, keep going up. We're up to number 2.
Okay,
Says-
page 43.
Yeah, page 44. So you see where it says, pass the buck, blame the flesh, back to Plato.
Mine
Folks.
says page 43.
Yeah, I think he has slightly
You're
different
kidding.
numbering.
Uh-uh.
Maybe that's why everyone's confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, so pass the buck is at the bottom of page 43.
I must have done an adjustment to it.
Formatting, right?
Okay. All right. Bad on the teacher. All right. So last week we talked about sin is sensuality, and sensual sins are the sins that we think of that deal with the flesh or the body, maybe sins that we sexual nature or carnal, if we think of it that way. And remember, we talked about this one, they get greater visibility. It's safer to talk about than social justice. So to say that, well, I don't do this, therefore, let's talk about this, right? To talk about other things would talk about things that impact all of us, right? So some of the sensual sins are the ones like you say, well, infidelity. Well, I'm not even married. I don't even worry about that. You know, that sin is definitely the worst sin. And so we need to be careful not to just get involved with ideas that we feel, well, it doesn't affect me, so therefore this is going to be the worst. And that does happen. So on page 44, we have passed the buck, blame the flesh, back to Plato, folks. We need to remember that sensual sins must be studied under 3 conditions. A, this is only one form that sin can take, and it is not necessarily the worst. B, the source of all sin is what?
The heart.
Is the heart. And C, it must be understood in personal terms: sex, food, alcohol, neutralities by themselves.
Okay, what does, the source of all sin is the heart?
Yes.
What exactly does that mean? It doesn't mean the organ, the heart. That means,
No, well,
means-
it's more of the metaphorical heart, saying that, it's the heart. So why do we do what we do? It's from inside. Everything about Jesus really is about the heart. And
You
again,
have heard that you should not have, sex with other people, but I say if you have looked at a woman
lustfully, or cause her
lustfully,
to,
you are
right,
committed.
Okay.
right.
It's what your inner feelings really are.
Yeah,
for the sin comes from.
Andy is
very-
quoting, I think it's a Sermon on the Mount,
Yeah. I think
and
so.
then he also says, you have heard it said, do not commit murder. But if you are angry with your brother or sister,
Right.
you've already done it.
Right.
Right, so it's a matter of the heart. So what Guthrie's saying, it's not so much what's going on, the addiction to gambling or sex or food or alcohol, it's what drives it, right? And so it's something that, we look at these external pieces, and that's what we jump on when we should really understand it's a matter of the heart, right? And not think of people, because we look at certain things and we say, well, that's just dirty, that's just, I don't want to see this, right? And we all get stuck in that pitfall. right? That's something that, and it's not just us as individuals, but it's us as a community. So, and I'm not just talking about the church. All right, Miriam, we're having a
Yeah, I
class right
know.
now.
See?
You show Alan after class, okay?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to get this done for church.
Oh, okay.
See?
Get busy.
All right, yeah, you better get started. You have a lot to
Yeah,
color.
Yeah.
I got these to do. I got that one.
Okay, Miriam, we're
I
having a class.
I got a lot of them to do
Okay.
today.
Okay,
Oh my God.
all right,
Better
get
get
the
busy.
coloring.
Yeah.
All right, so what the point that Guthrie is trying to make is that we have, it's a matter of the heart, and we do look at things, certain aspects or byproducts of the heart, and it's bad. We don't want to see it. And it's not just the individual, it's not just the church, it's society in general. So it's Christians, it's non-Christians, when think about it. We don't like seeing, filth. I remember as a kid, growing up in New York City, we would go on field trips, and we'd go to Broadway. My teacher would take us to, we saw Oliver Twist, we saw, when I was in middle school, we went and saw Macbeth off Broadway, and then I want to say we saw off and on Broadway. Yeah, I saw Christopher Plummer playing Macbeth as a middle schooler. That was really cool. But as you're walking in this, and this is before the Disney takeover of 42nd Street. So you would walk in this, you're walking to these theaters, and all around you are like peep shows and bookstores,
Yeah.
and the teacher and my teachers were great. They were such tough, strong people, and and I remember she would say, "Don't look, eyes forward, eyes forward, eyes forward," and and I felt like we were a bunch of robots. We were all walking like this, because all around you was this,
Yeah.
was
Smut.
this culture,
They actually
smut.
had pictures of the bare chested.
Oh
women
yeah,
out
oh
in
yeah.
front.
And we were probably, I don't know, I'm trying to remember what 7th or 8th graders, 12, 13 years old. But within this is, of course, where all the theaters were. So of course we were going to go see this. I mean, here as a kid, I got to see Christopher Plummer live. I mean, that was pretty cool. I didn't know who Christopher Plummer was then. I know who he is now, and I can look back on that and say, yeah, that's really neat. I got to see him live. So, it's things like these that we say, that society puts this, but again, Guthrie would say it's a matter of the heart. It's not just what you see, it's what causes it. And so we must always keep that in mind. So by doing that, you don't want to attack, you want to help, right? You want to bring restoration back, right? And these are human beings, these are people, just like you and I. So remember, it's always a matter of the heart. Guthrie then brings out a point and says, in C, that sin is the desire to be good. You say, okay, what does he mean by that? So we've got a passage. Sin is a desire to be good. And this is Guthrie. Christian theology understands the story of sin, of the first man and woman in the garden, to be the clue to the meaning of the sinfulness of all men and women in all times and places. Stop now and read the story in Genesis 3:13. Who wants to read that? So it's Genesis 3, 1 through 13.
Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die." "You will surely not die." "You will not surely die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called to the man, "Where are you?" He answered, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." And he said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" The man said, "The woman you put here with me,
Lamb of the woman.
That's right. Pass the buck. Pass
she
the
gave
buck.
me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it." Then the Lord God said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate."
All
The
right.
word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
All right, Alan, don't forget to pass me that card before the end of class. All right, so it doesn't take long for the first instance of passing the buck. All right, what is it like, page chapter 3 of the Bible?
Right.
The man says, the woman did it. The woman said, the snake did it, you know?
The devil made me.
And they're all sitting there doing this, you know, except the snake because he doesn't have fingers, you know? Snake's doing this. You know. All right, so what is the sin of Adam and Eve? And our sin. It is an indication of how profound this ancient story is that several answers can be given, two of which we have already discussed. We could say that the root of all human sin is disobedience. It is doing what God commands us not to do. Perhaps we could find an indirect connection between sin and sensuality and sexuality. It is a very indirect connection, for the story shows none of the preoccupation with this form of sin that has obsessed the church through the centuries. But the text does say that the woman saw that the tree was good for food and a delight to the eyes. Genesis 3:6. And it does say that the result, not the cause, of sin is shame and guilt that comes with the awareness of nakedness, right? They realize that they no longer, hey, we're naked.
He told you you were naked.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite lines in Genesis.
Yeah, it's cracks me
Who
up.
told you you were naked? It's like, I think of that every time I watch The Waterboy when Kathy Bates says, "Who told you you was a voygo?" To Bobby Boucher. According to the most emphasized interpretations in the history of the church, the fundamental sin of Adam and Eve and all human beings since is pride. Sin is the desire to be like God, or more accurately, to be like what we think God is and would be if we were God. Our sin is that we are not content to be dependent on God. Let ourselves be loved and cared for by God, love and serve God. We want to be self-sufficient and autonomous, able to do anything we please, unlimited by anyone or anything outside ourselves, with power to exert absolute control over our own lives, over the lives of other people, and over the natural world around us. Contemporary feminist and liberation theologians have argued that the sin of Adam and Eve and our sin is not so much arrogant self-assertion as passive self-denial and servility. Like Eve, who let the serpent control her life, and Adam, who let Eve control his, we cave into this temptation to give up asserting ourselves as the free, mature, responsible human beings God created us to be, as we live in the faithful service of God in partnership with one another. Perhaps some of us, especially men and people who have positions of power, may sin be pridefully playing God as we seek to dominate everything and everyone outside ourselves. But many of us, especially women and those who are victims of unjust and oppressive social structures, sin by subserviently allowing others to tell us who we are and what we can and cannot become, what we can do and cannot do, even if it means surrendering our value and dignity as human beings created in God's own image, and our responsibility under God to defend the value and dignity of other people who are also created in God's image. Our sin is that we think not too much, but too little of ourselves and what God created and empowers us to be and to do. Still, another interpretation of the story of Adam and Eve is to say that the root and essence of their and our sin is lack of faith. We do not believe that we are safe under the care and command of God. So we try to take care of ourselves and tell ourselves how to live. Pride and unbelief go hand in hand. All these interpretations may be legitimate, but they ignore the significance of the literal words of the text itself. The Lord God commanded the man, "You may freely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in that day you shall eat of it, you shall die." Genesis 2:16, 17, emphasis added. But your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Genesis 3, 4, 5, emphasis added. What is the root and essence of sin? It is the desire to know good and evil. So, according to Guthrie, all these other pieces sound good, but Guthrie would say the true sin and the root and essence of sin is the desire to know good and evil. How can that be true? It is not the whole point in going to church, reading the Bible, praying, and trying to live a Christian life precisely to learn the difference between good and evil so that we can be good and not evil. No wonder what some thinkers have said, that the fall of Adam and Eve was a fall upward. Does not all progress in individual human development and human history depend on learning to distinguish between what is good and what is evil? But it is no accident that the story of Adam and Eve traces the desire to be like God in this way to the temptation of the devil. Those who first told the story knew that this desire is a fundamental sin that lies behind all three of the basic forms sin may take. So what Guthrie is saying, that yes, all of these hold water, but it is the desire to know good and evil that is the root. So, that would be like if you wanted to graph it out, that would be up top, and the others would kind of branch off of this. Because think of it, they knew that the tree would do this, right? God actually said your eyes would be opened, right? Let's see. You will not, okay. And it's the serpent who says that. And in essence, the serpent, is deceitful. But, there are pieces, he doesn't lie all the way. You're not going to die. They didn't die. They had a spiritual disconnection from God, so spiritually they died. This is, how Reformed theologians say, well, it's spiritually, it's broken. But they didn't physically die. They will physically die.
Yeah,
I was going to say,
later on.
Eventually,
I think they were
died.
But their eyes are open.
arguably immortal.
Could
before.
you
you
assume
think?
that if
I don't know.
they hadn't sinned, they wouldn't have died? I don't know.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Within the story.
Well, the wages of sin is death. So
Yeah.
if there's no sin, then
Yeah, I don't think.
is there death?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So that's what it meant when it says if you eat from this, you'll die, not you'll take a bite and drop dead.
Right,
Right.
right. I think, I agree with you, Alan. That's how I interpret it. So it was kind of like a half-truth, what the serpent said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're not going to die. Well, they didn't just, like Alan said, they didn't just keel over and die. But yes, they would eventually die. And creation now has this, break in it, right? It's now this condition that all creation has to deal with, right? It's this broken condition. But their eyes were open. They saw things now, right? They are not totally dependent on God any longer, right? To care for them. Now, in fact, God's you're out. Can't live here anymore,
You're
right?
on your own.
You're on your own, right? You want to be on your own? Now you're on your own, right? They also, their eyes are open because they now see things. Ooh, we need some fig leaves. Yeah, we ain't got no clothes on. And when God says, who told you? How do you even know you're naked? And so according to Guthrie, the root of it is they wanted to be like this. They wanted to have knowledge. This is why she went there. It wasn't that she was starving and there wasn't any of the fruit in the garden. She went there for one reason, right? She wanted to know. This will give us more knowledge. But that root, then the others kind of, branch off of it. Because it does. You can say, well, what about all the other things? Yeah, you can't deny that. But they branch off of this one, right? They branch off of this. I don't know why, but I always think of, that quote from the Spider-Man movie, probably from the comic book, with great power comes great responsibility. And that, now that you know more, your lives are going to become a lot more difficult,
Right.
Yeah.
and they do. They become increasingly difficult. I would imagine if, within the narrative, within the story, if they didn't do that, well, the story would be a lot different, but I'm sure it would be pleasant and.
Well, yeah, I mean, what, they've got to till the soil and the woman's going to have pain giving birth, right? Which,
Yeah.
isn't that part of the,
Yeah,
part of the
right.
thing?
There's going to be weeds and burrs, and it's going to really be the pits now that you have to till the soil, and pains in birth, and the serpent is going to slither on its belly, throughout existence, and.
What do you suppose the serpent looked like before that? Do you think it had arms and legs?
dinosaur. I don't know.
That could be.
I don't know. It's a good question, Alan. Within the story, I'm not sure.
And it had the ability to speak.
It had the ability to
But
speak.
it doesn't say anywhere in the Bible that the ability to speak was taken away.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like,
The strong silent type.
I mean, does the devil just take the form of the snake in the story?
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe. But then, of course, is where you get that piece that is taken by the Christian church, and it's they point to where it says, the serpent you will strike at his heel, but he will crush your head.
Right.
And that's out of Genesis. I think it's Genesis 3:15 actually. Excuse me. And they say, well, the devil strikes at the heel of Jesus by Jesus being crucified. Excellent, but he will, crush your head when he rises from the dead.
Right.
And so this is, people might say, well, it's an old story. It's one of the first. It is, the first story. Does it have relevance for the New Testament? Well, it does. I mean, because here they are, the early church is pulling from it and saying, look, this is how we interpret this, that the serpent struck at Christ's heel and Christ crushed his head. And you could say, well, it's death. You can say it's personified evil. You can say it's the devil himself. It's however you look at it, it's still the same result. It's Christ conquering death, right? And and here we are going all the way back, and they quote from that very piece, and that part is as God is giving out the punishments, right? The lineup, right? And it's just, to me, it's very comical. It's almost like I'd see like Gary Larson doing a comic on this one, because there they are, Adam, Eve, and a snake, and there God is doling out the punishments, right? Yeah, but I also find it interesting because it really is the first example in the Bible of passing the buck. No one wants to take the blame. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
It's her fault. It's the snake's fault. And what does the snake have to say? I'm just a snake. All right, so those who first told the story knew that this desire is the fundamental sin that lies behind all three forms sin may take. I'm under now 1 under C. The desire to know good and evil is rebellion against God. God alone is good, and God alone knows what is good and not good. 2, the desire to be like God, knowing good and evil, is enmity against our fellow human beings, who are more dangerous than people who are sure that they know both for themselves and for everyone else what is good and what is not good. We know people like that, right? People who know what's best for you or for me. We love hanging out with those kind of people, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. The desire to be like God, knowing good and evil, is self-destructive. All right? So, and it is. It's definitely self-destructive for their side, for their case, right? I mean, God is like, out, and you can't come back, right? So, yeah, it's self-destructive. So, from these 3 points, we can see how this is kind of like the catalyst, right? But the other sins that come in from it, again, you can hang them on it, right? This is the beginning sin, but everything else fits on this, right? All right, now that is the first piece, and the first piece is, that's the three basic. All right, now the next piece that we're going to get into, and we have about 5 minutes, is original sin. Now, we don't talk about original sin so much in the Reformed Church, but there are other denominations who do talk about original sin quite often, and it's part of their theological backdrop. But I'm going to read a piece from Guthrie about original sin. A mother says to herself at the breakfast table, "I'm going to do better today. I won't be as impatient with the children as I was yesterday." But when she goes to bed that night, she feels guilty, knowing that despite her good intentions, today was yesterday all over again. I'll be more understanding, more forgiving, more open, more courageous in standing up for what I know is right, more Christian. Who of us has not decided that over and over again in dealing with members of our families, with friends, people we work with strangers who wait on us in stores, only to discover over and over again that we should but can't or could not be done, or could but don't, What we're up against is original sin. The problem lies in two apparent contradictory truths. One, sin is universal and inevitable. All people everywhere always have lived in self-contradiction to their true being in the image of God, from Romans 3:10-11. But if all are sinners, then everyone must be a sinner. There is no one who cannot sin. Nevertheless, every person is responsible for his or her sinfulness. No one forces me not to love God and other people. It is I who sin, and I know that I am guilty, even if I do not want to do it. All of us, in other words, are caught in the trap. William Faulkner describes what he has a wise person in Requiem for a Nun say paradoxically about sin. You ain't got to. You can't help it. Christian theology has tried to understand the predicament of our inevitable but responsible guilt by following Paul, who in Romans 5:12-21 and 1 Corinthians 15:21-22 connects it with the original sin of Adam. It is interesting that although the biblical story of sin's entrance into human history is a story of Adam and Eve, Paul and Christian tradition make Adam alone the center of discussion about the connection between the sin of the first human beings and of all those who come after them. In our discussion, we will follow this tradition, remembering that Adam, which in Hebrew simply means, what does Adam mean?
Man.
Excellent. Adam, right, man, now becomes the prototype or model for the sinfulness of all human beings, both men and women. We will consider two ways which the relation between Adam and all has been interpreted within the Reformed tradition. So the first is inherited sin. All right, that's the first port, the first way that we look at this within the Reformed tradition, which is out. The traditional Christian explanation of why people are sinners and cannot be sinners was first formulated by Augustine. Let me read that again. That's a little confusing. The traditional Christian explanation of why all people are sinners and cannot not be sinners, there we go, was first formulated by Augustine. Most of the older Reformed confessions follow him. The first man, Adam, sinned, and his sinful nature has been passed down to all of the people as a hereditary disease, wherewith infants themselves are even infected even inside their mother's womb. The Belgic Confession, Article 15. We are connected with Adam and his sin by our biological descent from him. All right, so that's the first piece. This explanation has some things in its favor. One, it seems logical and even scientific. It seems logical and even scientific. Genetics, right? Well, if we're related to Adam and Adam is sinful, well, it's passed down our DNA. Two, it seems to have a biblical foundation. Indeed, I was born guilty, a sinner when my mother conceived me, from Psalm 51:5. And 3, a clear connection with Adam and us. So it connects us, right? We are connected to Adam, right? The first man. However, the explanation of original sin as inherited sin can also be criticized for several reasons, right? One, if this view is correct, how can people be held any more responsible for their sinful nature and sinful acts than for the fact that they inherited blue eyes or handicaps? Right? So Guthrie says, if that's the case, then it is what it is. Right? 2, in the background of the doctrine of inherited sin is the unbiblical idea that sex is the root of all sin and that sexual intercourse is responsible for the spread of sin from parent to children. 3, although the Bible does not connect the sinfulness of all people with Adam, it says nothing about the cause and effect hereditary connection. Although the Bible does not. So although the Bible does connect the sinfulness of all people with Adam, it says nothing about the cause and effect. So it's not saying that because Adam sinned, well, the rest of you are doomed because of that through original sin. Finally, the biological explanation of the connection between Adam and us distracts attention from the one way in which sin and guilt are transmitted from person to person, generation to generation, not by sexual intercourse, but by social influence. Right? So according to Guthrie, the 4th point is saying that it's not, by saying that, well, sin is, it is because it's within Adam, then it moves down to us. Guthrie says, well, then you're not looking at, you ignore the social influence. That we do it. We see it, we like it, we do it. In a way, it's not, I think to Guthrie, perhaps he would say, it takes away this piece of, the devil made me do it. I think sometimes people will say that, and it kind of deflects off of them.
Right.
Like, oh, well, the devil made me do it. No, you did it. Don't say the devil made you do it. You did it because you wanted to do it, right? And so I think...
Why did you want to do it?
Right.
Anyway, never mind.
Yeah. Well, and that's theology. Right? Because of our broken condition. Yeah. So Guthrie, like he always does, he's going to look at both sides of what this is, right? So, I think there are arguments for the doctrine of original sin, and I think there are arguments against it. All right, next week we'll pick up. What's next week? The 1st? No, the 27th. What? 28th?
27th, I think.
27th. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, we have 2 classes before there is no class because I won't be here. All right, and I'm not going to be here for 2 Sundays in July, so we have to decide: do you want to have class in July when I'm here? Do you want to take July off? What do you want to do? I don't care either way.
Take July off, probably. What do you guys think?
What's the situation? You're not going to be here at all in
2
July?
Sundays.
2 Sundays.
2 Sundays.
Oh,
in
yeah, I
July.
get to
So
take
do
them.
we want
Yeah, I'm gonna be gone the-
month off?
Oh,
It's the Sunday after the 4th, and then I'll be back. So I'll be here the 1st. I won't be here the 2nd Sunday. I'll be here the 3rd Sunday. No. I think there's 5 Sundays in July. Are there 5 in July?
Got your calendar up there?
Here, I got a calendar right here.
yeah, so...
July, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's July 1st, July 8th, July 15th, 22,
Yeah.
and 29.
5 Sundays.
Next Sunday is the 1st.
It is?
Is it?
No, it's the 24th.
24th, yeah.
Yeah, okay, there's that,
Mhm.
the highlighted day. Yeah, okay, I thought you said the 27th.
Yeah, it's the 24th, yeah, you're right,
I-
the 24th.
Yeah, 24th, and then
Okay.
the week after that is the 1st.
What, do we want to have class July 1st and July 15th? And
I mean, I'm fine with either way. I just wanted to let y'all know that, that I will not be here the 2nd and the 3rd. No, 2nd and 4th Sunday?
Yeah, I'd be fine either way, or we can just
Okay.
play it by ear.
Okie dokie. You turn the camera off?
Of course.